We're having a conversation about the far right, and someone who, like me, wants everyone to rub on and get on with each other and be nice to each other. I mean, it's not too much to ask, is it? Well, we're concerned about what seems to be the rise of the far right in this country, and we want to try and work out how we deal with the threat that they pose. How do we avoid normalising their views without at the same time giving them the opportunity to claim that they are somehow the martyrs to free speech? Tommy Robinson with that well-known picture now, isn't it, with him with a bit of tape over his mouth, as though he isn't given a voice. I think we've heard quite a lot of Tommy Robinson. And the question is, by hearing about him, do we risk that hate being spread? There is that risk. But I'd be very happy to take on these sorts of people, to take on these sorts of views. Let's be clear. There are bad people in all sections of society. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? There are some very bad British Muslims in this country. But they are, thankfully, a tiny minority of the British Muslim population, to the extent that we can even see populations as segregated according to religion or race. Because, of course, in reality, particularly in somewhere like London, we kind of all live cheek by jowl. We live close together. If you look at my street in Notting Hill, we probably have people from about, I would say, anything up to about 20 different ethnic backgrounds on my street. I think of someone from an African background, someone from an Iranian background, and so on and so forth. Someone from a West Indian background, someone from a half Jewish background, someone from a half Lebanese background. I mean, the list goes on. So we want to live in a cohesive society. And what happens when you hear a report of not a real apparent abrogation of responsibility by authorities in Rotherham, and the fact that people seem to be getting away with terrible, terrible abuse because the authorities didn't act remotely quick enough. This then fuels people's sense that somehow the establishment, the political elite, are trying somehow to protect British Muslims or British Asian people at the expense of young girls, and that is a toxic mix. And you'll never find me defending the authorities not acting on some of the worst crimes that any of us listening this morning or speaking this morning can think of. Of course not. And this is the way The Independent put it just a few months ago. They said that the government received information detailing the extent of grooming gang activity in Rotherham as far back as 2002, but failed to properly act on it, a review has found. The National Crime Agency's ongoing investigation has revealed that more than 1,500 girls and young women may have been abused in the Yorkshire town between 1997 and 2013. A report by Alexis J exposed blatant, inverted commas, failures by police and the Labour-run local council where officials feared racism accusations at the time. And the independent inquiry said an unpublished Home Office research report from 2002 described the extent of child sexual exploitation in Rotherham and a series of criticisms over the response that should have raised concern. But a large-scale inquiry was not launched until after a Times report on the scale of grooming provoked a national scandal a decade later. So a Times report exposed the lack of action. Not Tommy Robinson. 0345 6060 Let's go to Anne in Dartford in Kent. I nearly called you Dartford, Anne. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. No, I'm Anne in Dartford. Matt, you really disappointed me. The first 40 minutes, you filibustered. You had someone on, you told us it was about Tommy Robinson and the far right, and you filibustered for the first 40 minutes. I was really disappointed.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Anne.
Well, who did you have on? Nobody spoke to you until 20 to 2.
Well, hang on, I was speaking to Jonathan Friedland, who's our guest from The Guardian, who's written a piece just about 24 hours or so ago in The Guardian talking about how to handle the far right. I think he's pretty relevant to this conversation. That's called setting up a discussion, Anne. Now, don't waste the time that you have on air having a go at me for what you call filibustering. Get on and make your point about the far right and how we hold them to account.
Right, so Tommy Robinson, I don't agree with everything he does, but if it wasn't for him, the grooming gangs would have been kicked down the line, the same as the Catholic grooming was kicked down the line. We now have to grow up, and Catholics, I'm a Catholic, we now have to accept that, yes, this is what Catholic priests done. Muslim people have to stand up and say, yes, this is what they do. If it's Catholic priests that are grooming children, if Catholics know, and you have to look out for those priests that are a bit dodgy. If you're in a school and there's Pakistani men waiting outside in cars for 12, 13, 11-year-old girls, if you're working a preschool, a pupil referral unit school, and there's black guys outside that look like they're, not look like they're selling drugs. That's the wrong thing.
Sorry, you're now saying black guys selling drugs, Anne. Do you think drug selling is confined to black people? Come on.
No, I said that wrong. Wrong, but we know that from the lady whose son was killed, he was a young black guy. He was brought into the spider's web by other black guys who brought him chicken
By
and
other people.
trainers.
By other people.
No. The mum said it was other black guys. It was other black boys that done it, older black guys. But if we're going to refuse to say it was Catholic priests, it was Pakistani men, it was black men, it was black youngsters that are doing grooming, doing drugs or whatever, how do we protect our children?
Well, we protect our children by encouraging people to come forward, by encouraging families to be vigilant, by encouraging social services to do their job properly. Hang on, let me finish because you asked the question. By encouraging the police forces to do what they're doing, to make absolutely sure that there are no police forces anywhere in the country who don't act appropriately because they fear being called racist. That is essential. Obviously it is. We need the police to do their jobs. We need social services to do their jobs. When there is any hint of criminality, we need the police to get involved. And that is what we... What do you say, Anne, to the, I don't know, as I say, about 2.8 million British Asian people in this country who have committed no crime whatsoever in their life and would dissociate themselves entirely from the sorts of disgusting rapists that we see being put behind bars? Well, they're British Asian people. They're not going around raping people. So how do we get on top of this?
The same as what I do, Matt. I'm a Catholic. I'm not a priest. I do not abuse young children. I do not rape little boys or rape little girls. But I come out against them. I stand up against them. I think the Pope is absolutely...
But who are you standing up against when it comes to grooming gangs? Are you standing up against British Asians? Or are you standing up against the rapists who do the grooming?
I think as humans, as parents, as adults, we have to stand up for the children, no matter what ethnicity they are, no matter what colour they are, But
who are you holding to account other than the people who commit the crimes?
I think years ago, Catholic people wouldn't admit that priests done it. Because, Catholics couldn't do such awful things. I think, again, Muslims may be thinking that no, Muslim people can't do this. It's come to terms with actually people in your own community can be the scum of the earth.
So should we find out what a British Muslim thinks, Anne? If you don't mind, I'd love you to stay with us so you can continue to have your say. Let's bring in Abbas in Redbridge. Abbas, good morning.
Hi there, good morning. There clearly are some vile people who refer to themselves as being Muslim who do the most horrendous things. That's the reality. But the reality here is, you see, is it Anne, sorry, that I'm just speaking to?
Yeah, Anne's here,
yeah. Anne mentioned, black men selling drugs or whatever. But, it's not because they're black that they're doing that. It's because they're criminals that they're doing that. And that's the problem, you see. We want to categorise people with their race or their religion and somehow justify our, let's say, hatred for those people based upon those issues. But the issue is that there are bad people out there, and some of them are Muslim and some of them are not. Some of them are black, some of them are white, and some of them are Asian. But they're not bad because they're Asian or because they're black or because they're Muslim.
No, but Abbas, so this is an important point here. So, do you agree with me, though, Abbas? And I'll bring you back in a second. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with me? See, my problem with what Sajid Javid said was that he described these paedophiles as Asian. Now, the judge, in his judgment, did mention the word Asian, but it's not that they're Asian, I don't think, that is relevant. If these people, in any of these cases, if they attacked white girls if they attacked white girls specifically because they were white, if they were being racist because of it, then we should call them out for their racist rape, for their racist sexual abuse, for their racist grooming. We don't call them out because they're Asian. And do you see that? Do you see the distinction there?
Yeah, and I'm not calling out black guys because they sell drugs, because they're black. I'm saying because the young boy that was shot and killed was a black guy, and his mum said he got into the gang with other black guys. So I'm not racist against anybody. I'm just saying that as adults, if we know black guys are standing outside the Peru units, if Pakistani men are standing outside schools, if Catholic priests are standing outside schools...
What about the white paedophiles, then? I haven't heard you have a go at the white paedophiles who I've described to you earlier in that fact check, who represent 100% of people who target people because they are themselves people of long-standing paedophilic interest. I'll repeat that. In 2017, according to a Channel 4 fact-check verdict, white men make up 100% of recorded Type 2 group abusers who target children because of a long-standing paedophilic interest. What do you say about these people, Anne? Why don't I hear you calling them out as white people?
Because they are done in the house, aren't they? They are not done outside schools. They are not done outside...
Wherever they do it, Anne. Why are you not saying we've got a problem with white paedophiles?
I am saying that, Matt. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm saying that white priests, the priests are mainly white.
No, leave Catholics out of it for a second. I'm talking about these white Type 2 group abusers. 100% of them are white. Why don't I hear you ringing up LBC and saying, what are we doing about the scandal of white abusers?
Because you're not letting me answer. You're talking over me. Where do the white abusers do it? They abuse it within the family. So unless...
Well, no, not necessarily. No, not necessarily. That may well be individual people. But here it says, all it says here is Type 2 group abusers. Why aren't we dealing with that issue, that 100% of those people are white? I'll give you one more chance to answer that, because I do want to bring Abbas back, Anne.
I think anybody that abuses children, I don't care what colour they are.
But so far you've just talked about Asians.
Because we were saying about Tommy Robinson, that's where we came in from, Matt. You can't now change it for me.
Anne, I'm not changing it at all. Let me assure you I'm not. The point about Tommy Robinson is like you. He's not calling out the white paedophiles. He's just calling out what he sees as Muslim paedophiles. Abbas, you can have the final word before we go to a break.
I think fundamentally this is the problem. The problem is that if you concentrate on a subgroup of paedophilia, the problem that you have is that you have a very blinkered view of what is an extensively huge and very damaging problem, and the perception that the false perception that is then derived from that is that somehow it's more inclined with a particular group. Now, grooming gangs is not the only grooming that goes on, and yet these people who want freedom of speech and freedom of expression to, bash Islam and bash the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, they only want to concentrate on that subgroup of paedophilia, but not the whole, which is very telling. Because if that's all you're going to concentrate on, then clearly it shows some sickness, I believe, in your heart, whereby you're not willing to look at the wider picture of this horrific crime and deal with it in a way that would hopefully, diminish it and hopefully eradicate it. But you want to just concentrate on one group of people that you already have, I believe, a predisposition to believe certain things and hate and have that hatred. And you only want that hatred and that division to be fanned by, as I say, concentrating on a very, small group. 3%, I think grooming gangs make up 3% of the entire grooming that's going on in this country. And I think that's what's very telling here.
But I don't know whether you're right on that 3% figure, Abbas, but given that 75% of that Type 1 group abuser, I think that we describe as grooming gangs, they do seem to be Asian men. They are Asian men, according to that fact check. Abbas, so we ask you this because we had a caller just before the news who was saying that he was using words about the Prophet Muhammad that Muslims find incredibly offensive, describing him as I'd say it wasn't his point of view, but he described it as fact that he was a rapist if you studied his historical life. And that the implication he seemed to be making, which I found deeply offensive, was the idea that Muslims, because they look up to the Prophet Muhammad, would somehow wish to emulate Prophet Muhammad. Untangle that for us, if you would.
See, this is the problem. There's so much ignorance. First of all, the issue really revolves all around his marriage to Aisha, because the hadith explains that Aisha explains herself that she was 6 when she was betrothed, and the marriage was consummated when she was 9 years old. Because within the Islamic and Judo tradition, puberty was the age at which you could get married, not before. Now, that law didn't exist in the vast majority of the world because there was no minimum age. What people want to do is they want to look at the life expectancy, the education level, the social norms of the 21st century, and then they want to retrospectively apply the social consensus of what is considered to be morality within a secular system and apply that to the 7th century and then assert that makes him a paedophile. It's intellectually, quite frankly, a bankrupt argument. There is no argument on an intellectual basis, but you can argue that on an emotional basis, and that's what they do. They play on emotional heartstrings.
But just to be absolutely clear, spell it out for that chap and for anyone else who's confused listening this morning, that British Muslims do not wish to try to emulate a man from the 7th century who had a child bride.
Well, Muslims, for example, are only permitted to have sex with anybody within the confines of marriage, first of all. And these guys were having, sex, A, with the underage, which is illegal. B, they were intoxicating them with alcohol and drugs, which is forbidden in Islam. And then they were doing acts with these children, which, if they were in an Islamic country, would serve the death penalty, quite frankly. So how can that be attributed to Islam encouraging them to do that? But the problem that you have, Matt, you see, is that people will hear what I've just said, and they will just ignore it because people are not interested in the data, or they're not interested in facts anymore. What they're interested in is just feeding their predispositions, even if it means that it's false and it's inaccurate and it's unjustifiable, but they would rather believe the lies that people like Tommy Robinson peddle out. And when a Muslim tells them, they'll just say, oh, well, you're just covering things up, or you're just lying, or you're just making it up. But within Islam, I think it's widely respected, widely known that sex is only permitted within a marriage, and certainly rape and having sex out of marriage within the Islamic context is forbidden. It's not allowed.
Abbas, thank you. Abbas in Redbridge having his say. Thank you to Abbas. 0345 6060 973.